This is Things Police See, First-Hand Accounts, with your host, Steve Gould.
Welcome to the podcast that interviews active and retired police officers about their most intense, bizarre, and sometimes humorous moments on the job. I am, in fact, Steve Gould. Thanks for being here, everybody. Thank you for coming back. And if you just found the show, thank you for joining us. Glad and happy to have you. This is the show, as the gentleman said in the intro, we interview police officers, the men and women of law enforcement, totally unedited. They don't hold back at all. The idea is you get a view, you get a front seat view of what these men and women are doing out there, and hopefully get a better appreciation for the job and what it is that police do. Thank you to all the new Patreon supporters. Awesome. The Patreon audience is growing, supports the show monetarily. There's two levels there. There's patrolman, and there's also sergeant. You get a couple different things with each, but you will get a vinyl Things Police See sticker mailed to you, direct access to me, and you can shoot me a question, and I'll ask it on the show. I have a question today for the guests and I to go over, so that will be fun. You guys actually don't utilize that a lot, but I encourage you, if you have a question, ask me. I'll ask it on the show. I'll see what the guest thinks, and it's a good time, everybody. Also, I want to push the YouTube channel. I'm late to the game on YouTube, but there is a YouTube channel. It's growing. All the videos go up there. I got this fancy software I use. I'm trying hard at it. So, like I said, I should have started doing YouTube years ago, but I was just all 100% into the audio, which is still the meat and potatoes of the show. But if we grow YouTube too, that would be fantastic. And again, thank you for the rating and reviewing. Whatever app you listen to the show on, if you give me a 5-star review, I always love that, and it's hugely beneficial. So for today's show, guys, we have 27-year patrol. Part of that was 5 years in jail. He's worked for Contra Costa County. He's worked in San Francisco as a transit police officer, and he's recently written a book, What Doesn't Kill You, One Cop's Perspective on Homelessness, Mental Illness, and Addiction. This guy's worked in some pretty crazy areas, so I'm excited to get his stories. Without further ado, let me bring on Eric Hofstein. Eric, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me on here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having the appropriate audio gear. It's so nice when people have this stuff.
Well, I have to admit that I snatched it from my kid's PS4 PlayStation.
Whatever it takes, man. I appreciate it.
I looked at it and said, that looked like that'll work here too.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so I send out a letter before the guests come on, and I send like an intro letter. Then I notice like nobody reads it. So now I put like in the email, like, please read the intro letter. And did I do that on yours?
I think you sent me some intros.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't want it to be pushy, but it's like sometimes when it comes on, they'll be like, the guests will be like in like a room with like family members talking and like no headphones, and it's like, bad audio. So, it's a pet peeve. I used to say nothing because I'm so polite. I was just like, all right, I'll just deal with it. And then like sit there editing for hours trying to make the audio good. So I said, you know what? I just got to be upfront. So I appreciate you, Eric.
Thank you. I appreciate being appreciated.
So interesting career, 27 years total. So you end as a transit cop, which seems like, for my area anyways, transit police is it's not really a slow job. Like the Transit Academy in Massachusetts, they're pretty hardcore. Like they make the recruits shave their heads. They have a huge jurisdiction because of the trains. So I read in one of a little synopsis about your career that you were kind of like at the twilight of your career, you went to the transit. So is it different than here? Is the transit police slower, or is it more of a easier detail?
Well, I grew up in New York, as I mentioned earlier, in the city. I took the subways, and it's a little bit different on the East Coast than it is where I was at. Where I was at, BART is a unique transit system. It covers 5 different counties. Actually, it's up to 6 now. I think it went into Santa Clara, the heart of Silicon Valley, about 50 different cities. And,
wow.
California is pretty big to begin with, so it covers hundreds and hundreds of miles. So you can go from the heart of Silicon Valley into the dead center of Richmond, where I worked as a deputy, which is heavy gang territory. Um, it's a private system. It gets grants and some federal funding, but it's not like the New York transit system that has all the huge history behind it of kind of growing with the city, the two in tandem. Um, Transit, the big difference is you don't go into people's homes. You don't have to worry about
Right.
traffic. You're in a little, as my partner put it, a city on the tracks. And before COVID hit, there was about 500,000 traveling the system per day, about 450,000. They call it crush load trains during the peak hours. And it's a little unnerving in that when you have a beat, you know everybody in your beat. You get a sense of comfort. You kind of, even people who are dangerous, you kind of know, you can feel. There's a sense of perception that you have when you're getting into a dangerous area or a dangerous situation. You know the homes, which neighborhoods might be neighborhood to kind of have your head on a swivel.
Mm,
In transit, when those doors open, you have no idea who's coming out that door.
right.
It could be somebody on a murder spree across the country and wants to come see San Francisco before he goes out in a blaze of glory, to parolees absconding, to hardcore criminals who realize, hey, if I take transit, then can't get a car stop and they can't search my trunk or whatever I got hiding in there.
Right.
So they throw them in bags and they take them on the transit system. So there was an adjustment, but it is a step down in that you have so much less responsibility from a patrol perspective, because you don't your beat are basically three stations. They usually, roughly, it's about three stations per team. In San Francisco, we were two-man teams, and the stations are pretty similar. They're designed the same. You understand how they operate. There's nothing different or unique from one beat to the next. Makes it easy to kind of get a feel for what you have to do. Be visible, look for problems, pick problems out of a crowd, understand the dynamics. It's a little gets crazy when you deal with something because you can have up to 1,000 witnesses
Yeah.
standing there all yelling, and they hate cops in the West Coast, so you get
Right.
nothing but yelling. They throw things. There were times when I was even helping homeless people, putting emergency blankets over them due to hypothermia, and they're yelling at me about messing with people. It's like, well, you want to come here and help?
Stop
No,
trying
I
to
just
save his
wanna-
life.
Yeah, I just want to yell at you. I don't care about helping them. I even had a couple of homeless kids that I worked with get into fistfights with people coming up filming me.
Yeah, defending your honor.
Why are you talking to that minority person? Why are you talking to them? And then the kid I'm talking to, hey man, this is my friend. Get the hell out of here. And then
Yeah.
they're in a fist fight.
Unbelievable. That's
It's
unreal.
so- yeah, you're in the heart of anti-cop territory out there. There's protests just about at least weekly. There was a point where it was almost daily. There was some kind of protest or march going on, and you can't do like some beat cops do and go and hide behind the 7-Eleven
You're right.
wait for it to pass. You have to be on your feet, standing in the middle of it. So these things I didn't quite understand at first. I just know that at least I won't go into homes. At least I won't be pulling dead bodies out of houses. I
Right.
won't be doing big crime scene investigations out in the bad weather. Um, the other beats you have a patrol car, but San Francisco you walk. And I thought, hey, maybe it'll help me get in shape towards the end of my career, because
Right.
towards the end of the career is when you tend to pack on the pounds.
Yeah.
But I didn't realize, okay, I'm going to be walking 5 to 10 miles a day up and down stairs with 25 pounds of gear on. So that part was a little more difficult.
Yeah, you get to the
Didn't lose
top
that
and you're
much
like,
weight.
need a second.
Oh yeah, and then something breaks bad. You got a 911
Yeah.
call, and you're already out of breath, and you're just, hang on a second.
That gear is heavy, man. I went to the courthouse. We have the DA's office on the 4th floor, and the elevator either it wasn't working or somebody was in it. It's an old crickety elevator that people have gotten stuck in. So I'm like, I'm just gonna bring this stuff up myself. Full gear, 4 flights of stairs. I get to the top and I was like, I couldn't talk right. I'm like, oh my gosh, I am friggin' out of shape. This is brutal.
Well, it's hard when it's on you too, when it's clamped on.
Right.
The new vests they have.
Absolutely. So when I was in LA, I noticed that the train cops there are originally LAPD had the contract to do security on the Metrolink. And then they lost it to the sheriffs. So now the sheriffs were doing the security. So there's not really a trained cop. There was like another agency would get contracted, and then would be like an overtime shift, I think. So I did notice that, but I'm new. I didn't really know the area, so I noticed that like sometimes deputies would wear because cops ride free if they're in uniform, so they can help, you know. But you notice sometimes a deputy or an LAPD cop would wear, even if it was hot out, they'd be wearing like an overcoat, and you could see they're in uniform, and I was like, why are they wearing an overcoat? And I learned after riding the train for like a year and a half that when the conductor comes and is like looking for someone to come help, they don't want to be fingered. You know,
Yeah.
they're like,
We all did that.
I'm trying to go home. I don't want to do this.
We got the keys to the train conductor's car cab in the front or in the back, and that's usually where we would go hide because crammed in there with the conductor. Like, I'll just be as small as possible. I don't want to be out there.
Don't mind me.
Yeah, you don't want to be in the middle because if they see a uniform, they will hunt you down on those trains.
Yeah, it's annoying. I mean, I remember my commute was like 40 minutes. So if you got like, it wasn't like New York City, totally different type of train. These are more like comfortable, bigger passenger trains. You know, they're not like subways. And the Metrolink would, if you got a crazy person that like wanted to talk to everybody or talk to you, and it was like, you really, most times you weren't in a car with a cop and you had no idea where a cop was, but you're going 80 miles an hour careening through traffic on this train, and there's this guy that just is like, you either have to, you either just try to ignore him and hope it doesn't piss him off, or you just like nod along to his crazy conspiracy theories and just pray he gets off at a stop. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Try getting into a fight with one of them, knowing that your next stop is not coming up for a good 5-10 minutes.
Oh.
In San Francisco, they have the Transbay too. So the Oakland is on one side, San Francisco's on the other. If you miss that last stop, you are now on that train for a good 10 minutes or so going underneath the bay. So,
Wow.
And that's where stuff tends to happen because they go from one county to the next. You know, there's jurisdictional issues. You start a crime in Oakland, the train dumps you out in San Francisco. The San Francisco cops are now grabbing you.
Right.
But if you end up in a fight on that train, sometimes you can't, we're like, no, we're not going to contact this guy until the train comes out the tunnel. Because you get into a fight, you are fighting with no one to come to you, with that train hurtling through that tunnel, just waiting for the next stop to come up.
Ah, it doesn't sound like great to me, Eric. I don't like that at all.
Well, for us, we just won't get involved in stuff unless we have to. But
Right.
There's a lot of fights, a lot of, you'll get stabbings that happen, and then everybody's trapped on the train together, screaming into 911 until it gets to the next stop.
Right. You said you were it was private, so did your police power still came from the city though? You guys were sworn with the city?
So that was I actually mentioned that in the book. In California, you have the 836 Penal Code is what gives you your police powers, your authority that puts you above private person arrest. They made a specific penal code just for BART, 832, I believe it is. And it spells out the same things, but it identifies you under a separate statute for your police powers.
Interesting.
But otherwise, they're the same. Yeah, it just like I noticed some jails, they have COs, and some jails are deputies. We were deputies. We were fully fledged sworn police officers when in the jail.
So you weren't like the
Same thing on
Pinkertons or anything on the train?
No, and that's where it gets confusing because sometimes people think you are, and you're like, they tap you on that badge. That badge ain't real. You're just a rent-a-cop. You're just
Right.
Well, I take you to a real jail with real handcuffs. So
Yeah, like the Amtrak police, they're cops. They take you to jail.
yeah, yes,
You know, same
We worked
idea.
with them.
Yeah, well, I took that train from LA down the coast to San Diego. What a nice ride. There's a bar car in there. You can have a beer, go along
Oh
the
yeah.
coast the whole way. I met my buddy of mine I grew up with is a partner at an equity firm in Boston. And every time he goes somewhere, it's the top floor. It's so if he was ever within shooting distance, I'd be like, all right, let me come hang out with you for the night.
Because he likes to go in style and
Yeah,
class.
yeah. Let's use that company car for some aged steaks and expensive bourbon.
But that coast is beautiful, isn't it?
Oh my gosh, unbelievable! And it's so sad too because I haven't been to San Diego probably for 2 years, but it's getting like LA. The homelessness is
Yeah.
the Gaslight District, Lamplight or whatever they call it, where it's really kind of nice with the old lamps going, is just huge encampments. Huge.
Last time I checked, LA is at 45,000 homeless. San Francisco, we were at 8,000 crammed into 49 square miles. San Diego, I forget. Seattle was about 10 to 15. And Oregon, I don't know the numbers, but it's along the whole coast because of the weather. The weather, the
Yeah.
beautiful geography.
Yep. I used to say it all the time in LA. I said, there's no in Boston, New York, there's a natural culling effect called winter. It's 0 degrees. The old homeless people are gonna die. In LA, I would say like an 80-year-old homeless man. I'm like,
Yeah.
because you can go to the beach and take a nap.
Yeah, they sleep out on the beach. There's some people who made
Right.
an entire way of life about that. We lived in LA for 3 years. My wife's from there, and I didn't like it. You tend to either like Northern California or you like Southern California. They're very, very different from each other.
That's a big regret of mine is I never made it to Northern California because I just hear how beautiful it is.
Very different.
A little bit more,
That's
a lot of hippies
redwood.
still, but a little bit more reasonable,
Well, that's where the redwood forests are, the redwood trees and the mountains, and you have the Wine Valley out there. You go up into Napa, you get towards Eureka, where Bigfoot, the legend of Bigfoot, is out there, and Happy Camp, where you go river rafting.
Bigfoot's up there chilling.
Yeah, we actually saw Danny DeVito when we went out the river rafting last time, and they dumped his entire boat load of belongings into the river.
Little miniature clothing floating down the river.
He was not happy. He said that I love it out here. It's better than being balls deep in snow in New Jersey. So,
Yeah.
But it's San Diego. I've never even been there.
Oh, really?
My wife jokes. She says anyone from California, they've never been to San Diego. There's no reason to go there.
That's funny. It's a nice. We went to La Jolla once for a little like long weekend, and it was nice, but the there's things about it that it just gets ruined by humanity. There's just too many people, and because I'm from Cape Cod, where I was born and raised, and like the beaches there are like pristine. I mean, they don't. The thing with the beaches on Cape Cod, they go away. They get eroded, and they're always changing. And on California, the beaches are evergreen. They're just there. Like the beach they filmed Baywatch on is still there. It hasn't lost. It's not no erosion. But anyways, we were in California, and it was like in La Jolla, it's wacky. It's like, oh yeah, well, there's been some signs of the Mexican outfall pipe this week, so maybe don't go any further or don't swim near Coronado, the island, because they've had some debris in the water from the Mexican outfall pipe. I'm like, ugh, disgusting. Yeah. It's like there's turds floating out there. It's in this
on the streets. They have you have your sewage watch. Every day you have to check the alerts for how much sewage is in the water.
Yeah, and the seals, they treat the seals there like people. The seals took the beach, so we can't go there anymore. It's great.
Yep.
It smells terrible. There's seals everywhere. They seem aggressive. They don't seem that happy. They're not nice seals. No. All right, Eric, let me ask you, can you tell us about your first hot call you responded to, call that got your blood pumping?
Well, it's hard to remember the very first one. My first memory of one, I was a reserve officer, volunteer. So anywhere from 1993 to 94, probably early on. And they had a foot pursuit, a stolen car. Suspect gangbanger got out and ran. And he disappeared, just poof. The perimeter was still set up. So I'm all excited. I'm wearing the uniform. I still got the tags in it. Everything is creaking really loudly.
The leather's all creaky.
Yeah, I'm feeling like, oh my God, I'm a cop. Where you still have that civilian mentality. It hasn't sunk in that, wait, I'm the popo. I'm the police.
Totally.
Especially because I was still full-time EMT, and this was what I did on the side on my free time. So I had a partner. We were two-man teams because reserve status. And we get there, and because we're the extra bodies, we start searching the interior of the perimeter. And it was, you get that rookie luck, the rookie luck.
Yeah.
The new guy comes in, and you're just thinking differently. You still got training in your head. And I looked up, and there he was, shaved head and all, hanging up on the roof, looking down at me like, oh my God, I'm the cop and I found the suspect.
You're the bad guy.
What am I supposed to do? I think in TV they take their gun out. So I had the gun out. I did the whole high risk stop from the roof thing. And I'm thinking I'm going to get yelled at. I don't know what I'm doing. But that was, I guess that's why it stands out in my memory. That was the first time I did cop things, feeling like a cop.
Yeah.
With a high stress situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I can remember that too. Like you said, having the new leather, the new belt, the vest is like, it's just, you think you're fine, then you sit down in the vest and you're like, oh, I feel weird with the vest, and like you're sitting in the cruiser and yeah, it's like pinching my love handles, it's like, you just feel out of sorts. You feel like it's imposter syndrome. You feel like I've put all the gear on, but am I really this now? But yeah, but when anybody looks at you, you are the popo. That's it. You're the cops.
And because it's all clean and fresh and looking sharp, it's not scuzzed over like some of the old vets.
Right.
They tend to come to you because you look squared away.
Yeah.
You're thinking, no, don't fuck me. I don't know what I'm doing yet.
I don't mind when we have a guy in the department that's like freshly out of academy, because they've memorized the elements of crimes, and they're like, when you talk to them, they're like, oh yeah, a disturbing piece, there's only 2 elements for that one, and they start rattling them off, and I'm like, oh, it's good to know I don't have to hit the book when you're around. I'll just ask you.
Or sometimes you forget, and you're like, hey, rookie, what's terroristic threats, the elements? I'm testing you, but in reality I don't remember myself. I would make it look like I'm a veteran.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Mass is really bad about juvenile laws. They completely revamped it, I think, in 2018. So it's like we actually have our own law book for juvenile stuff, and they've changed what we can do, who we can cuff, where we can bring them, how can they go in a cell, can they not? You know what I mean? It's completely changed. So I actually have a juvenile book in my duty bag, and when I get one of those calls about like an uncooperative kid or a kid that's under a court order to behave, if it's not an emergency, I pull over and I look at that juvenile book and I go, all right, what can I do with this kid? Because it's like, it's a lot. And there's certain turns you can make that are bad. Like there's certain juveniles you can't put handcuffs on. You know what I mean? Like that type of thing.
Yeah.
So it's a complete nightmare to keep up with that. But I remember waiting in line at Dunkin' Donuts with my partner when I was brand new. I was on the road with my buddy, and we were like 25 or 26. And the lady in line behind us looked back and she's like, I mean this as respectfully as possible, but you guys are so young. Brand new cops, everything's shiny, and we're 26. So to her, it was like, basically like, you're the authority? This seems crazy.
Yeah, it should be rumpled collars with a cigarette dangling out the side of the mouth in her view.
Exactly. Wake up in the morning, take a shot of whiskey, all life falling apart. Same thing though when young Marines come home to like a small town and like or if they're at the Memorial Day thing or whatever, I see the young Marines, the young Army people, and the young sailors, and I'm like, I'm in disbelief. It's like, wow, they are so young, like 18, 19, 20. They really do look like kids. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
And combat hardened, a lot of them. They've been through a lot, so it's.
Yeah, I think
gives
by
you perspective.
Yeah, by design. I mean, because if you can go back to your 18-year-old mind, you were never going to die either. You know what I mean? Like if you put a 35-year-old out there after basic training.
I can give you a funny story on that if you want to hear it from a
absolutely.
friend of mine. Back when the LA riots happened with Rodney King, my buddy I worked with, he did a ride along down in LA with his friend who was an LA cop. And they were doubling up military with the police officers so they could put more cars out there. So you'd have an officer and a soldier, usually National Guard, Reserve, somebody in the other seat. Well, they started coming under fire from a house.
Oof.
And according to my buddy, they bailed out of the car. They got behind the car for cover, coordinated. And as my buddy put it, the mistake his friend made was telling the soldier, "Cover me." So you talk about terminology, cover me in
Laying
police
fire
words.
down.
Yep, he laid down. He laid down, cover fire. So his buddy's running, hearing the gun going off, going, "Oh man, oh boy!" And funny thing was, they supposedly waved white rags and pillowcases out the window.
Oh
We
my
give up.
gosh.
So you have to kind of remember that the different world they come from, different terminology,
Oh
different
yeah.
tactics.
Totally. Yeah. If they were to go to war like we police, they would be killed in a second.
Well, now San Francisco is bringing in the National Guard, according to Newsom, for the drug dealing.
Really?
And my biggest question is what are they going to do? They have no police powers. They have no police training. So what
Yeah.
happens when one of them gets shot at? The way they're trained, what are they supposed to do?
That's
So
crazy.
that was the last article I read. I don't know if they're going to follow through with it, but that's what Newsom said he was going to do.
That's great. I mean, I've heard of that. Like, I had a guest on years ago who talked about the LA riots, and of course they need the National Guard. And they actually lit a guy up, a drug dealer who was like, I think he had killed somebody, was ramming a barricade or something. It was, clearly they had the right to do it, but it was like the National Guard lit him up with machine guns on U.S. soil. It was like, even though they had the right, people were still like, this is not good for soldiers to be, ripping down civilians. This should be the police who are doing this, but they had no choice,
You remember all the resistance too about police officers getting long guns?
Oh, yeah.
Before the Bank of America shooting, and
Yep.
they didn't want to, but they'll bring in National Guard and soldiers, but not give
Right.
police officers the same weapons.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. We used to do a Citizens Police Academy, and I would bring up the AR because I was a fire instructor for the station I was at. And I would just tell them, I would show pictures of like the old, Western deputies, and they've always carried rifles. They carried long rifles because there's great just open distances and people can take shots at you, and kind of ease them into the fact that it looks like this. It's a scary looking rifle, but it's not any different than a semi-automatic rifle with like a wood grain stock in a magazine. Like it's the same. It functions the same. It looks scarier, but I was working on Cape Cod, and I would say, we don't have a lot of people on the road at any given time. And if there's a school shooting, it's going to be 2 or 3 of us. That's it. We're going to be the only ones. So you want us to have everything we need to take this person out. And they all kind of understood that, but it was kind of like a real gentle, I kind of had to ease them into it. Cause as soon as they see that AR, they're just like,
They freak out.
yeah, you're going to kill us.
That's the problem is the gear looks scary, but when you need it, you need it.
Yeah, we really fought. Massachusetts was kind of resistant to the carriers. When all the stuff comes off the waist and goes up onto the
Right.
vest. And I agree. They don't look as nice. They don't look as I think nothing looks better than the Sam Brown belt with leather, with the snaps, with the vest on the inside. Like that looks. It's like almost like a Class A now. That looks good with the tie and everything. But realistically, we had people going out on back injuries and hip injuries like crazy. But the military knew this years ago. They've been putting stuff up on their vests for a long time. And when you put the stuff in front of the select board or city council, the studies on officers' backs and what the government, whatever city or town government is going to have to pay if the guy goes out. Or you could just let them wear this weight-bearing vest.
Yep.
And it's really true. Like, because I always, my hips and my lower back used to kill, like if I did a double. And if you mix in like a canine track with that, when you actually have to like move around a lot in your vest, walk through the woods, my hips and back were on fire. But since I got the carrier, all the weights up here, I've never been sore at the end of a double. I'm fine. Totally fixed it.
But we went to remember the same fight. Law enforcement is slow to change, and the admins tend to like a prettier looking uniform.
Sure.
But nothing changes law enforcement faster than money, talking money.
Right.
And when people are going out on those back injuries or light duty, that's going to change the philosophy quickly. And we went to those carriers, same thing. And my favorite part was on the hot days being able to just pop that thing open and you
Go do
just have
your
a T-shirt
reports, take it
underneath.
off.
Yeah, exactly. Throw it on,
Fantastic.
take it off. I'm a big believer in them.
Yeah, that's the hard part though for me is if I do take it off, when you got to put it back on, it's like
Oh yeah,
it's all wet. You're like, I don't want to do this.
yeah. It's like putting on your wet bathing suit again.
Right. You just might as well. Exactly. That's a great analogy. Yeah. Terrible. Eric, can you describe to us a strange or bizarre moment from your career?
Yeah, it was a strange call, and it's really hard to paint the picture. But I don't know what you guys call. What do you call your mental health holds when somebody's a danger to themselves or others?
Section
In Cal
12.
12, we called it a 5150.
Right.
There's even clothing, 5150 clothing. It's kind of well known on the West Coast. So we had a call of welfare check, possible 5150. The RP, the person calling it in, was the ex wife who was a highly respected psychiatrist, claiming her ex husband, who was also a highly respected psychiatrist,
Oh boy.
was a danger to himself. And she had technical reasons why she wanted him placed on a hold. Um,
And
I
would
went
she
to
have
the
the
house.
legal authority to do that herself in California?
Um, Technically, they can. Cops can do it, and doctors, any medical doctors can write the hold. But this is something that's unique about law enforcement. That's why they. That's a whole nother rabbit hole I'll fall into when you talk about co-responses of putting a mental health worker with a cop.
Right.
Well, it's the cop who writes the hold anyway, and
Right.
we're trained in that. The
We have
field
that
is
here.
different than
Yep.
the office, so you have to go out there and you have to evaluate. Um, Now, there's new law, which most people are aware of, that if somebody resists, you can't harm them for the purpose of preventing them from harming themselves. You can't use force. In Fresno, you mentioned Fresno earlier. Fresno PD will turn around and drive away if somebody won't come to the door. They're not going to go in there and fight somebody because he's a danger to himself. Being a danger to others is different. So this was
Wow, that's
back before
interesting.
all those changes. Yeah, that's I don't know if you're aware of that. There's
That's going
been
to be really hard to do your job. I mean,
Yeah, I think there was a case where somebody used a beanbag gun and plugged somebody who was a danger to themselves, and they ended up getting all sorts of damage, facial fractures, and the courts were saying no. The whole point is to help him, not
right.
bust him up because he
Blast him
might
in the
hurt
face.
himself. Yeah.
Right.
So, but this was before all that. So I went out there, and I'm now interviewing a 30-year plus experienced psychiatrist
Nightmare.
about whether, and he doesn't want to go. He's saying he's not a danger to himself. She's saying he's a danger to himself. I'm caught between two psychiatrists and the X factor. Could there possibly be a financial motive? My ex is
Right.
calling him, but he said they got along. So I went into the bedroom. I did do you have weapons? Do you have any means to hurt yourself? Do you have a plan? He knew how to answer all the questions.
Of course.
He had it all down. And I didn't want to walk away and something bad happens, and psychiatrist, the RP can articulate very well what the things I should have done in hindsight. So I'm trying
Right.
to think, what could they say in hindsight? I got to
Oh,
figure this out. I go into the bedroom, and all I can explain is, have you ever been to the Museum of Natural History in New York? They
went to the
have
one in D.C. or
they
something like
have
that.
those like diorama displays, like a glass case, and they
Oh
have
yeah.
little samples of cavemen back
Yep.
in the and okay, yeah, that's what it looked like it was built by a shaman out in the forest. He had bamboo structures, poles with animal feathers and skins hanging off it, swords and other types of weapons all around it, all encasing the bed. And he had guns in the
Weird.
closet too. Oh yeah, the when you work with shrinks are a weird breed.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed.
And I didn't know what was going on in there, but I was scared to touch anything. The whole room was like he was fighting things that didn't exist in the off hours.
Right.
So I came back out and I have to figure out now, okay, the dude's weird, uh, but does that make him a danger to himself?
Right.
And then he's articulating why he's not. I call her. I'm trying to talk to her on the side. She's like, no, no, no. He's not taking this med, and this med. If he doesn't, then that makes him a danger to himself. He's going to get psychotic. It took me about an hour and a half, and I ended up talking into going with me to get help.
Oh, thank goodness.
But trying to, that's again, putting that responsibility on a cop with the
Yeah.
minimal training they give us and the weirdness of the way this guy was. What is weird and what is a mental health red flag
Right.
was the hardest, weirdest thing I've ever done in this job.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. Yeah, because usually it's like, all right, are they? Hopefully, the easiest thing is they are making statements, and then it's like, all right, well, this is easy. But then you have the guy says he's normal, but he has all that weird stuff and weapons going on. That's
It wasn't like I was going to walk away and it was a
right.
pristine house with no danger. And I remember thinking at one point, this is like the opposite. I'm the one supposed to be on the couch being interviewed by this guy. I got him in the kitchen in the chair. I'm interviewing him.
Yeah. Wow. That we have a co-responder program going on in our county now, and like you were saying before, it's great because they're clinical psychologists and they ride with us. It's like an overtime shift for us, and when you do it, you kind of drive large all over this part of the county. And when there's a mental health crisis, you'll be the car that goes, and then that town or city already has police officers, so you're just kind of there for the protection of the social worker. And like you said, for us, they make the decision with all their, most of them have masters or doctorates. They make the decision, and then you write the 12, and it takes all kinds of heat off of us with their expert opinion. It's great.
The problem I have with those programs though is their degree is for the clinical setting. They're trained in an office. I actually had the top psychiatrist in San Francisco come and do a walk along with me when I was doing my homeless outreach. And we had one of our regulars who was low key. Guy was not a threat, but he was not right.
Right.
And my partner and I watched her spend half an hour going in circles with this guy. She comes back and she says, well, that's not like at the office.
Yeah.
Their training for the field is very different than training for what they do in the clinical setting. And I have some issues with that. I think it's better to have specialized officers the way you have traffic officers, you have gang officers.
Sure. CIT trained.
Yeah, but the CIT training is very, very rudimentary.
Yeah.
It doesn't. I mean, somebody you have specialties. And when I worked at San Jose PD, we had two gang units. You had a uniformed gang unit that went around in two-man teams dealing with the gangs on the streets, and then you had the gang investigation unit where I did some work. Departments have specialized units that address the problems that they face, whether it's traffic, DUIs because of bars in downtown,
Right.
gangs because of the gang neighborhoods. I don't understand why more departments don't have mental health units with highly trained officers who can do what you're doing out there, but on their own, because you don't need a whole lot. There's no set of magical string of words that if I put these words together, I'm going to make an irrational person suddenly rational.
Right.
If they're irrational, it's usually a biochemistry issue that's going on, or they're taking some kind of substance. They have an SUD disorder. They're maybe undiagnosed, like schizophrenia doesn't hit until the early to even late 20s.
Right.
So
I've
all
heard
of a
that.
sudden, I had some stories, some news articles that were written about some of my work with that, where we had people who were crazy walking around the streets for years. One of the kids I helped get back home, 5 years walking around the street, completely out of his mind, would fight the cops. He was undiagnosed. All he needed was that diagnosis. But there was no way you were going to get to interview him. There was no way you were going to talk to him on the street because he was extremely hostile, didn't want to talk to anybody, didn't want to be contacted. I was able to work something out. That's a rabbit hole story I won't go down. But the point is that I think if you give the specific officers, the tools to address these issues, you'll realize that a small percentage of people are causing the majority of calls for service. You have that house on the
Sure.
street, that one house that guy calls like 30 times a day calling 911, or that party house, or the house with the guy who hears things and he calls because he swears there's an intruder in his house, but it's his medication is lacking. Um, those kinds of calls can be handled by the police if you do it a specific way, if you set up a criteria for it on a team concept. What we did was a multidisciplinary team where you have your meetings, you discuss cases, and the officers stay in communication with those clinicians working with the doctors. But that takes a kind of work that I don't see many administrations buying into, and even the
Yeah.
public who hates the gun. If we got a gun, we have no business being near people who are in crisis, is how social media trends are going these days.
Yeah, even when we do our shifts with the clinician, we dress down. We wear like either khakis or gray pants. We wear a polo. Like we try to like minimize the impact of our policiness, I guess. You know what I mean? To try to
Right.
make people feel more at ease. And we really like the program because it's like we were talking before we started recording. We're at a place in Massachusetts where there's multiple small departments. So there's some departments don't even have a firearms instructor. They have to like use another department's firearms instructor. So getting a specialized officer in that would just wouldn't happen. Like they would never put the money into it. So for us, the CSO rides along, and then they do follow up with them. Like they follow them, they get them in, they interview them, and then you take them to follow up appointments with the person to see how they're doing and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
we've
that,
we've really liked it, but I do see your point.
well, no, just don't misunderstand. Police departments are very different depending on the area you're in. The police departments tend to reflect the community they serve. If you have
These aren't big cities with high
right low
volume.
calls, right.
Right.
In BART, we would get constant multiple calls of 5150s all shift long,
Constant stream.
constant, because they don't have driver licenses, so they have to take public transportation. Some of them have criminal records, and they
Sure.
want to kind of sneak into the train system. So something like that, you couldn't have enough social workers to respond with you to all the calls that we would get, and many of them ended up in hostile encounters. So
Yeah.
it just depends.
Yeah,
What you're saying, I
only
get.
go with police officers, and then we're the ones with the authority to 5150. So ultimately, it's our decision. But it is easy for the officers just to lean on the social worker because we feel like we don't have to make the call. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
the psychologist said so you got to go. But when I started my career, the Section 12s were much more rare, and when you had one, the person was like, there was no question. They were out of it. They were having a crisis. They were saying they wanted to hurt themselves. They'd already been violent, and we were cuffing and stuffing. It was like there was no like let the person come out and go like willingly. It was like an arrest. It was like behind the back arrest. Put them in the ambulance. Cop goes in the ambulance with them. You go to the hospital. They open the rubber room. Security monitors them from there. You leave. That's what it was like.
A lot of people. Was that before or after the meth crisis? Meth and opioids.
Before and then during, because Mass, like Cape Cod, where we're working, did have a large. I don't know if you saw the HBO documentary, but Cape Cod did have a huge opioid crisis. But a lot of those people weren't. I don't remember Section 12 being a lot of them. It was more like just like it was an attempt. They'd already attempted to kill themselves, or like we basically wouldn't Section 12 unless it was like super obvious. We took it like the admins of the PD were like, to do that to somebody, it's got to be super obvious. If you go there and interview them and they deny it and they seem calm and fine, we're not doing it type of thing. You know what I mean? It wasn't like
you're taking away their constitutional rights without a criminal charge.
Exactly. It's super. It was exactly what we used to say. Like people can be weird and they can do stuff and they can annoy you and all that stuff. It doesn't mean we can come remove their rights and force them into because when you do that anyways, and there is a provision in our law that protects us against any kind of litigious, repercussion if you're acting in good faith. But they just get released in like that day. They don't go through the full 72-hour hold. You get them to the hospital. The doctor looks at them and goes, "I'm busy. I work. I'm in the emergency room. Let this person go. Like this isn't and it's a big waste of resources and everybody's time." So
I think they called it community caretaking laws. The Supreme Court. There was some good publications on that. They give you a little more leeway when it comes to helping somebody, taking them against their will.
Right. Yeah. We have a problem with we deal with if you deal with the drunk, we don't have our own lockup, so we book them, then we have to bring them to the county jail, but the jail doesn't take drunks.
Right. Liability.
So it's we don't have a holding cell. So there's a PC law in Massachusetts where you can put somebody in protective custody if they're drunk or high. But where are you going to put them? So you're going to sit with them until they're sober, like your whole shift? Give them the PBT every 2 hours. Are you ready to go yet? So it's there's a lot of things that we kind of dance around out in the places without a lot of resources that are really tricky. But I had a guy on Seth Milligan, great guy. He's a Southern police officer, and he is like you're saying, he's like a mental health crisis officer beyond the CIT class. I think he actually instructs some of it. So. I think it's maybe Tuscaloosa. They have he's going to kill me if I don't remember his agency right, but they have dedicated mental health officers that are trained, and it's and they've been doing it in the South for a long time, years. They've had these guys, which I thought was awesome.
That's probably because of the wide areas they meets the needs of the department. That's why I was asking you about the opioids and meth because I noticed the West Coast, it's unbelievable. It's out of control. It's pretty much a citation or a court date if you get caught with drugs, any kind of hard drug, and even then they're not going to file on you. They're not going to file for a warrant. It's not going to go anywhere. So drug use is out of control. And I noticed when meth started picking up in some of the opioids, there's a difference between an opiate and an opioid. Opioid can have synthetic substances in it, but has an opiate in it. That people were literally going insane. Sometimes after just one or two uses, their brains were just completely fried. So the what do you call the sector 12 or
Section 12? Yeah,
Section 12s started just skyrocketing because a lot of it was drug-induced mental health disorders.
Yeah,
and they're repeat customers, and these people. You cannot rationalize with a lot of them who were just completely fried.
Yeah.
And this was the problem we were having. Having a civilian with you actually became a danger. Now you had to watch this guy as well as your own officer safety.
Yeah.
Trying to talk this guy down from waving a knife around. Because God help you in California if you use force on anybody.
Yeah.
So my last use of force, tasered the guy twice. He ambushed us. He had a security uniform on. He looked like a cop standing outside a police office door. And when I realized he wasn't, he ended up being a parolee who just got out of the pen. I think he went to prison for attacking cops. I think he wanted to go back. We ended up in a fight with him. He tried to kick my face in from the floor, heel kicking, fighting, tasered him twice. We were feeling the jolt through him, but it wasn't affecting him. I think he hit up on some meth. Full-on knockdown, drag-out fight. Wonderful Chesa Boudin was running the office then. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Mm-mm.
The DA they threw out of office in San Francisco.
Okay.
It was all over Fox News. His parents were the Weather Underground terrorists who were killing cops back in the day. And
just before Gascon?
Oh, yeah. Gascon, I remember well. Then after Gascon, Chesa came in, and I worked with him briefly in a meeting, in a group. But he was running the office, and the first thing he did was go after cops, filing criminal charges on cops' use of force.
Nice.
He dropped charges on a guy we caught with a sawed-off shotgun under his jacket. And then this guy who attacked me, no charges.
Wow.
He was on parole. His concept is if they're on parole, that's parole's job to handle punishment. No new charges.
What?
So, yeah, my case never went to court. Whole thing was dropped. And I got a message back that I should have de-escalated more.
That is so annoying to me. This overuse of de-escalation. It's like we've
Yeah.
been de-escalating for decades, and they're like, you
Yeah.
need to learn de-escalation. Yeah, we
What is
know
it,
it.
verbal
Sometimes,
judo, I think they called it in the
yeah.
90s.
Sometimes people need their asses kicked. Also, it's not all de-escalation.
The philosophy is in all circumstances, there's going to be some magic words you can string together to make somebody behave and act right.
Right.
And they don't get that sometimes, like you said, that mistake could happen. And then
Yeah.
we had a DA who was going to file on the cops before he'd ever file on the suspects.
That's unbelievable. I feel for, it's crazy. We were over in the West Coast for 4 years, and there is some amazing police work going on, amazing cops. And it's just amazing that they would, I have to believe it's because most of them are from there, that they stick it out, because they are treated so friggin' poorly from their admin to the DA
Yep.
to the public. It's like, man, you guys just get crapped on constantly.
You know what it's like when you're walking around on the 12-hour shift and people are constantly flipping you off. Fuck you. I hope your family dies. They throw shit at you. And no, you can't do it. We had young juveniles. One walked up to my partner and belly bumped him and said, What? What are you going to do? I'm a juvenile. You can't do shit. You can't touch me. I mean, it's fun to challenge the cops. It's fun to throw things at them and treat them. And then in the middle of that, you got to take care of business. And then the admin, they're real fast to hang you out to dry. I had more IAs and BART in San Francisco in my 5 years running through the city than I did my entire 27-year career in all the departments I worked.
It's not like anything you do, any action you take.
Anything. Everything's an IA. Everyone, they always, a lot of we had admin who, I don't know how your admin is, but they felt that they wanted to always get you for something to show that they're doing their job. Whether your name tag wasn't on right, one guy got it for that.
Wow.
He didn't have his name tag on, so they said, "Oh, IA, get that guy for that, then get this guy for this."
Unreal. Thankfully, where I work, I'm friends with my chief. I do what I'm supposed to do. He's pro cop. He backs us up. It's in most of the small places out here are like that. It's like they're happy to.
Really?
Yep, they're happy to have the officers because it's not easy right now to have people. But like the county I work in, most of the chiefs I know personally are like very much backing their cops.
And I bet turnover is much lower than it is on California.
It probably is. Yeah.
I would love to work in a place like that. We always wished we had admin like that. You found a good admin, a good lieutenant, a good captain, you followed them for your entire career.
Yeah.
Because it's just cutthroat out there. I feel bad for those guys. San Francisco, they're not even allowed to go hand. They have to do swarm tactics now. They got somebody out of control waving a stick around. They can't grab them. They have to talk to him until he stops.
It's unreal.
Seattle and Washington. I don't know if you're following what's going on in Washington State, where they can't chase somebody unless they have probable cause, not reasonable suspicion.
Wow.
Probable cause.
Wow.
So you get some dude running covered in blood, and so you hear some screaming. Unless you have probable cause to arrest that guy, you can't even chase him. Is how I understand.
I had a Virginia cop on that. She let me know. She sent me a message that they lost the right to pull people over for lights equipment violation on motor vehicles.
Yeah, Oakland is like that. Oakland was like years ago.
Headlight out,
no traffic,
no blinker, nothing like that. It's quite remarkable, Eric. It's like
Oakland. You cannot do traffic enforcement. It's considered oppressive policing, and an excuse in the mind of the supervisors and the Oakland politicians that's how cops do all the bad things they do. So no more traffic enforcement. Drive around with that Stolo with no license plate, no lights. You're good to go.
Brutal. We watched my police academy. They showed us a video of Oakland, and the video was a cop car pulls up to an intersection in Oakland. There are people throwing stuff at the cop car and firing firearms off in the air, laughing at the police. The police put their squad in reverse and leave.
Yep.
And we were like, what? That's when you call in that's when you call in 100 cops and kick some butt. They're like,
Nope.
no.
I worked Oakland. You'll come out. They'll be sitting on the hood of your car, looking at you. What are you going to do? You going to fight us? We had
Wow.
our Oakland stations. Our Oakland stations were the busiest. They were where nobody wanted to work the Oakland stations.
Oh, hell no.
Well, that's where the history of the Black Panther Party got started there.
Right.
Huey Newton. There's a lot of history there, animosity, and the cops did some bad things back then. So a lot of that is still felt by the public, and it spills
Sure.
over into San Francisco, which wants to demonize law enforcement on every aspect, every way possible.
I had, believe it or not, a buddy of mine has been on the show a few times. I'm not going to say his name, although he's been on the show, but because what I'm about to say, he had a hearing he's going out on medical for San Francisco, and during his hearing, they brought up the podcast, Things Police See.
Oh,
And they said, I don't know. He didn't give any details, but I think it was in the vein of, well, if you were having PTSD, then how could you go on a podcast and tell stories? Like it seems like you're okay with it. And he was like, do you know anything about mental health? It's like, what? It didn't go anywhere, but it was like, I felt terrible that they used TPS against him at a hearing. It was like, man, they're ruthless. They'll stop at nothing to get
San
these
Francisco,
guys.
they'll stop it. No, you're absolutely right.
I
I was diagnosed with complex PTSD, and it's amazing that these are the same admin that's supposed to be out there watching for people and helping you and making you take the classes on what to watch for. But at the same time, you end up in an IA, and they'll go after you.
yeah,
That's why cops don't seek help, right? Because it'll go in your record. You can get
right.
subpoenaed, and what they have in California, that what's called a pitches motion. A defense attorney feels that something in your personnel file is reflective on what you did to his client, they can ask a judge to pull your personnel file and make anything relevant available for court.
Wow. Yeah, my buddy, he went through some serious harrowing trauma while working there, and it's almost unimaginable to me that they would bring stuff like that up, to try to push him down or try to deny him. It's like, it's undeniable with what this guy's been through. It's really gross, man. I don't know how they have cops in California anymore. And this brings me to a point. I got a letter recently from Westminster, Colorado, a recruiter out there, and this will be his shout out because he wanted me to shout him out. And I said, okay, I'll give you guys a shout out. So Westminster, Colorado, hugely pro cop, huge transfer bonus. They're getting people from all over the country to move there because they're giving like 10 grand for qualified officers, and their admin is super pro police. And they're building, the city's growing, they're building their department, and they're overstaffing now for guys who are going to retire. The city's said, why don't we go 20% over or whatever staffing so that when guys retire, we stay at full staff. It's like, I never heard of a city being like this. It's like, it's unreal. But that's where all the California cops are going. They're going to places like Westminster, Colorado, or Idaho, or Arizona, or places that actually like their cops. Like, to them, it's like bizarre to have someone try to buy a coffee for you. It's like,
yeah,
why?
Yeah.
Don't you hate me? It's awful.
Yeah, that's the great thing about your show, is getting to listen to how different it is in the different states.
Oh yeah,
Even within the states, hearing what other guys go through, it's amazing to me. When I started, all departments were pretty much the same. You only changed departments if you were kind of moving or there was something going on in your personal life. Now it's like you're saying, you department shop. Where is the admin cool? Where are the citizens actually like cops?
right.
And that's what guys are looking for. And then you get a talent drain from the departments they're coming from. So now you got what's left, and what's left is still doing bonehead things, making
Right.
the rest of us look bad.
Yep.
And you got the blind leading the blind and training the blind. And it perpetuates itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of the southern in southwest states are great for police, and it's like they don't pay quite as well, but it's like a happiness tax. It's like, well, do you want to
Yeah.
like go somewhere where you don't feel like everybody hates you? It might pay a little bit less. Like there's a reason the West Coast pays so high because
Yeah.
they've done this deconstruction to police work, and they're regretting it. They're feeling it. They're like, all right, well, we need to start patrolmen at $100,000. It's like, wow, okay, well, I agree with that, but you're doing it because you're desperate because
Yeah.
you,
Making 120 grand is not is can be considered common in a lot of those Northern California departments.
yeah,
That's one of the things that drew me to BART was I'll be transit and I'll be doing less and I'll get paid more and the pay was very good. But like you said, oh boy, is it not worth it? There's no way I couldn't imagine doing 10 years in a place like that.
yeah, hell no. That's why the burnout is so high. Forget it. Eric, can you tell us about the most intense or terrifying call you went on?
Um, oh man, so many that added to my complex PTSD.
I can imagine.
I could tell you about the officer I watched shot or trapped in a garage with a suicide suspect victim, um, or a car chase where we ran into the woods and the guy was armed. But I think I'm going to pick a, a car stop I had because if you have cops listening to the show, I want them to have something to learn by. I used to be an FTO, training officer, and I still kind of carry some of that with me. I was driving through San Jose, 680, and I saw a car in front of me. We were the only two cars on the road, and all of a sudden it just jerked to the right, like somebody was reaching to the floorboard and accidentally oversteered.
Sure.
Um, didn't know if it was a DUI. It was at night, and I got behind it, and next thing I know, he's hauling ass. You could see the car leaning, going into the off ramp, the freeway. I think it was McKee Road, one of the side roads into kind of an industrial part of the city, um, a blue collar area. And as soon as I catch up to it, all of a sudden he slams on the brakes and pulls over. I thought at first it was going to be a pursuit, so I finished getting everything out. He stops. I stop, and LA teaches your car is your coffin. So I usually have the door open before I ever throw my car in park because you want to be able to dive out of that car. You never know when you're going to get ambushed. In San Jose, we had actually one of our guys got ambushed like that on an off ramp. So I had the door open. I get out. I'm watching him. I could see two heads, one in the front passenger seat and the driver. And the driver is just looking at me, taking these long drags on a cigarette. And I could see his eyes looking because I had the spotlights, the takedown lights on him, and I could just see
Hmm.
his eyes looking at me. And it was like one of those movies, like foretelling, where that,
Yeah.
and then hangs it out the window, tap, tap, then looks at me in the side view mirror. And I don't know what my brain was registering, but it was my spidey senses were going off big time.
I can imagine.
It was more than just the cigarette. It was just something about because we had people who were just assholes, and would just we're gonna this could be another drunk about to mess with me, but something about this guy, it was I couldn't explain it. So I called for a cover officer, and I was not going to go up to the car till a cover officer came there. It's going to be two of us approaching. I'm not going to walk up alone on this car. I also am a big believer in passenger side approaches. Hate driver side approaches. I've seen it save lives
Yeah.
going up on that passenger side. So I'm waiting, and my buddy happened to be my cover officer coming my way. We got hired together. And I'm watching this suspect to see what he's doing, the driver. And all of a sudden, he sticks the hand out the window and he holds it up like, "What? What are you doing? Why aren't you coming up here?" Kind of like, waving me up. I wouldn't do it. Takes a cigarette, angrily throws it out. My buddy gets there, and I tell him, "All right, driver, step out of the car." And he can't see me behind the lights. He's blinded. So he hesitates, gets out, and then he stands there. I tell him, turn around, come back towards me. Refuses, just stares at me. Starts dancing, starts twisting in circles, just doing all this stuff to agitate me, is what I think
Yeah.
he was doing. He's trying to get me to say, you know what? I'm going to rush this motherfucker. So
Right.
I wouldn't do it. It's like, no, come back here. I didn't play his game. This took a while. Eventually, we get them back to us. My partner hooks them. We tell the front passenger, all right, you too, come on out. I'm not walking up there. Come back to us. So we're done, and I don't know how they teach you high risk car stops. It wasn't really a high risk car stop, but I kind of did it like one because of the way these guys were behaving.
Hmm.
And I said, you in the back, I know you're back there. Sit up. Sit up. I want to see your hands. And I'm thinking I'm not thinking there's anybody there. I'm just doing the way I was trained. All of a sudden, I just see this head just slowly popping up in the back seat behind the driver's seat. And it shocked me because it was what I really wasn't expecting anybody to be in there.
Right.
What is this? So we call him back, young kid. And when I go up to the car, we go up and we clear the car because now I'm thinking my senses are just all off the charts. There was a loaded Makarov, stolen Makarov, a Russian weapon,
Mm.
in the center console. The kid was trying to hide it when he realized I wasn't walking up there. So the driver was a Punjabi gangster. Everybody wanted to be a badass gangster. Um, and what they were going to do, I'm convinced of this now after my evidence gathering and the way they were behaving with me after that, they were going to assassinate me on the car stop. They were trying to
Wow.
bait me to walk up. They saw me in the rearview mirror. They're like, let's take on this cop. Watch this. Make me chase them and catch up to them. And then they stopped dead so I could walk up to the car. Wanted me walking up on that driver's side. And when I wouldn't do it, it threw their game off. But I think the kid in the back, ducked down the whole time, was going to put a bullet in the back of my head.
Wow.
And I picked that story to tell because I want guys out there trust those senses. I don't necessarily believe in ESP or anything like that, but they're parts of the brain that are processing data, processing what your senses are picking up on
Right.
that you're just not consciously aware of. If you feel something is wrong, something's going on, go with that. And there's no reason to go risking your safety. Make them play your game. Don't play into their game. And I
Absolutely.
think the only reason I'm sitting here talking to you now is because I didn't give in to that.
That's excellent. Yeah. And that is creeping in now, isn't it, with how we do our job because officers are so afraid to offend.
Yep.
They want to give people the benefit of the doubt now because they don't want to be. Everybody's got their phone out. They're all recording you, and it really screws up good tactics because
Yep.
you want to be officer friendly. You want to prove you're not the racist. That type of thing, and it really is screwing cops up big time.
I used to talk to the inmates in the jail, and I said, "Hey, man, when you guys give us resistance, when you're screwing," because I knew a lot of them from the street, and is it a game? Oh, hell yeah, it's a game. We know what we're going to get away with, what we're not going to get away with. We know what's
Yeah.
going on. If we see you getting all timid and backing off and telling me 20 times, get out the car, 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 20 times, we know you're afraid, you're scared.
Yeah.
We're going to play that. We're going to that's our job, man. That's what we do. You got your job, we got ours. They would tell me this stuff.
Yeah.
Jail's a great experience, by the way. If you ever, man, anybody out there, you got a chance to work the jails. It sucks, but work the jails. You will
I
learn more about police work than
yeah.
anywhere else.
I've said that before in the show because I've had guys on that were COs and then became deputies and then hit the road, and it's invaluable what they learn from their constant forced interaction with criminals compared to someone who grew up in a nice neighborhood who had good parents that goes to police academy and then is thrown into the middle of
Yeah.
criminals when their own world, their own jargon, their own things they say, their own behaviors. You don't know any of it. You're like, you got to learn it. But if you're in the jail, it's a very controlled environment where you'll have conversations with these guys, and they're bored. They'll talk. They'll say things.
Oh, yeah, they do. They tell you everything.
You'll learn stuff. And I'll never forget a video I watched about they interviewed a guy that had killed a bunch of police officers, and they finally took him, apprehended him, and he was a sociopath. He admittedly had no emotion towards anything. Just killing to him was like just fine. And he made this it was like a metaphor about like the watering hole in the Sahara. He said, you go to the watering hole, I'm a jackal. And I'm a killer. But I'm not stupid. And he goes, and if I'm dealing with a cop and he's a soup sandwich and doesn't have command and he's kind of sloppy. I start putting a wedge in that, and I know I can take this guy. He goes, if I deal with the guy who's got command presence, boots look good, he's tucked in, he's not all over the place. I'm probably not going to screw with that guy because that guy's good to go. He's ready to go. And he said that's how he picked his police victims. He killed cops that were indecisive. They were sloppy, and he knew there was going to be a moment when they were indecisive or distracted, and he would take that opportunity to kill them. And it was chilling to listen to the guy talk, because to him, taking a life was like blowing a candle out. It was like, whatever, I'm getting away, and I'm going to kill the cop that I can. I'm not going to try to take the young lion who's on me, like, stink on shit. I'm going to take the guy that's like complacent and kind of afraid to do anything. So I think that was a really good and creepy video to watch. I think it's exactly what you're talking about. Like you take control of the situation. That's your stop. You control the stop. People aren't telling you what to do. That's not how it works.
Yes. And that's the problem. We're afraid to offend. And admins, I think it's San Francisco, they're not allowed to make them sit on the ground anymore. They have a rule. You're not allowed to.
Eric.
Sitting down is the best way to put them into a position of disadvantage, right? Put them in a position of disadvantage. There's one thing to watch a movie or watch videos, documentaries of a sociopath, but when you meet one and you talk to one of these killers, it's a different experience.
I
You
bet.
really see what it's like. You learn how to talk to them. You learn the red flags. When they're looking around, when they're getting those happy feet and they're getting ready to bolt or attack you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that prison work, man. That turns out good cops. I know they kind of had to shy away from it with LA County, because LA County is always going against LAPD for recruits. It's all the time. When I was doing backgrounds at LAPD, it was like, he's also in the pool with LA County. It's a race. Who's going to pass him through backgrounds first? And it was a no-brainer when you meet with a guy and you go, hey, do you want to be in the jail for 5 years, or do you want to hit the road? Like that. So LA County's they've softened on that, and they're letting people hit the road sooner, rather than they used to have a real hard rule of like 3 to 5 years, I think.
Yep,
before you could hit the road, and they've kind of softened on that just for recruitment, because they just it was the perfect tool for the LAPD guy to use, the background guy, to go, hey man, I thought you want to be a cop, you know what I mean? Kind of talk him out of it. Although the LA County sheriffs have like what a cool agency and what an awesome history. They have like a really cool rep amongst cops of being like real ass kickers. Take no prisoners.
My wife grew up in LA, and she still tells me stories about LAPD versus LA. So my wife's black, and she lived in a black community.
Okay.
In Carson, and she said, "Man, when the deputy showed up, it was yes sir, no sir."
Yes, I heard the same thing.
Get the fuck out of here, motherfucker! Out there.
Yeah, I heard the same thing when the
time they were brutal. They were
hardcore. Yeah, they were sticks. They were hit. They were. If they could, they would. Put it that way. There was no talking. Yeah. And that I heard that's part of the reason why Southgate in outside LA. I know there's some kind of penal code about what cops are supposed to wear in California. Like city cops are supposed to be blue, highway patrol is supposed to be tan at times. Like there's some kind of ordinance about what people wear. But I know Southgate has always dressed like sheriffs, and the city of Southgate also has a reputation for like keeping the fray out. And their chief flat out refused the new order and was like, no, we're going to keep wearing the green and tan. We've always worn it. I thought that was interesting.
Have you ever seen LA Confidential or read the book?
No.
James Ellroy, we actually listened to him speak. His stuff is all true stories. He's a history buff of LAPD and LASO. LA Confidential touches on that. They kept the mafia out. The mafia never got a foothold in LA because they would get off the plane and LAPD would be there waiting for them.
I've heard about that.
Take them, would 207 them, kidnap them.
Yeah.
Beat the shit out of them, put them back on a plane, and send them back to their boss.
Yes.
And that's how they kept mafia out. His books are pretty good. If any of your readers are into reading, you should check out some of James Ellroy's books.
Yeah, I actually heard that exact story from LA cops when I was in backgrounds. They said that must have been what they were talking about. They said the back in the day, they would do that to gangsters. They would get them either at LAX or what is the other one up there in Burbank? The nicer one to fly into. They would
Oh yeah,
pick them up
Burbank
there.
has its own airport.
They would pick them up there and they'd drive them through, Topanga Canyon or whatever, beat the bag out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The desert is vast and wide.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Eric, I've had you over for an hour, 15 minutes, man. I'm sorry, but it's been a great conversation. I appreciate it. Let me ask you one more question. So a lot of new police officers or people even thinking about getting into the profession listen to this show. And I always say it, and it's true. One of my favorite emails is, it's very close to my heart when I get an email from someone who says they heard you guys tell your stories, and from listening to you guys speak passionately about the job with all your knowledge, they decide to become cops because of the podcast, which to me is like amazing. That's the best thing. That's the best outcome for this podcast, for someone to hear the show, hear you guys talk about being a cop and want to do it, especially in today's day and age. So what words of wisdom would you have for candidates out there, new recruits, people just starting the job?
Yeah, as a prior FTO, I'm going to go with something a little more personal and recent. I'm going to say know your limitations. Know your limitations, because as you were talking about, there's a lot more trauma now. You don't have a supporting public. So when things are starting to get to you, when you're feeling burnout, you're waking up and thinking, man, I just don't want to go to work today. I think I'm going to bang out sick. That's a red flag. Recognize those red flags and maybe seek a lateral move into a different position, a different aspect, try traffic, something else, do something new and different. On the other end, don't be overly ambitious. Many of my friends who went up the rank and file regret going above sergeant. Sergeant, they say, is the best position there is, but I
I
stayed
hear
in
that.
patrol for a reason. I like police work, and I wanted to do police work. I didn't want to push papers. I didn't want to do admin stuff. I didn't want to investigate 300 cases a day. I wanted to be a cop. And if you want to be a cop and you like getting out there and you love being outdoors, there's nothing wrong with staying in patrol and doing that until they, as I wished was going to happen to me, they pry your decrepit knuckles off that old Crown Victoria, pull
Right.
you out of that car.
Yeah, hell yeah. Great advice, brother. Thank you so much. And one more thing. Clearly, you have a great knowledge about mental health and what's going on in the police world. As we talked about, it's really getting, it's taking up a lot of our time. It's becoming a serious problem with police. Tell us a little bit about your book, What Doesn't Kill You.
Real briefly, when I was in Contra Costa, I witnessed the death of a CHP officer, Ken Youngstrom. I was first on scene. And they say, I was told that PTSD is the difference between your expectation and the reality of the situation. I was expecting an officer fell off a motorcycle or something, or a traffic accident. I was not expecting an officer shot in the mouth.
Yeah.
Suspect was actually still alive when I got there. So it hit me, and I think it was the straw that broke the camel's back. So I wrote about that in the book, my path of empathy, of where you get, they call it empathy burnout, compassion burnout, where you just kind of get numb and dead inside what the job can do to you. And my path through that, and then PTSD into BART, and then I fell into the world of outreach, working with 8,000 homeless crammed into 49 square miles.
Oh,
And I
man.
got to learn their stories. Young kids, brilliant science. One was a scientist, nuclear engineer, eaten out of the trash. And my
Wow.
cop curiosity was like, what life did you live? What series of events led you up to the point that as a nuclear scientist, you're now sitting on a BART station floor eating out of the trash? And it fascinated me. I dove in, I fell in deep, and I
Yeah.
got to know their stories. I got to know the whys, the hows. What do we do about homelessness? What do we do about addiction, mental illness? And I kind of detail out my journey through that, my mistakes that I made up until the very end, things that I learned. And I'm hoping that others can learn from it. And it's
Absolutely.
the proceeds, we made it free on Kindle Unlimited and as cheap as possible. Um, the proceeds go to our nonprofit that we're building to work with people down here in Georgia.
Wow, sounds like a fascinating book, especially for people on the job, for police officers to read.
Yeah, there's especially the opening is specifically it's a police procedural style, like the Joseph Wambaugh books, police procedurals,
Yep.
what they call the style of writing. I wrote it purposely with the police procedural style, so with my co-author, also my editor, so that cops could. It's not you know how cops are. It's not a touchy-feely for the meat eaters out there.
Yeah.
I don't want to read about that touchy-feely stuff. It's not.
Yeah, I hear you. No, yeah. So cops they'll consume it and be happy with the way it's written. I totally get it, especially because that's like we all have the in service now every year. You know, we always have had a certain amount of hours, and always like a third of it is like the touchy feely stuff where every cop in the room checks out and is like, "You gotta be kidding me!"
And you don't want to be the guy who goes to teach it because you're like,
yeah,
no,
you got to pretend you're into it.
Yeah, really, guys, they make me do this.
That's the entry level to becoming an academy instructor. Is like, well, we have a DEI class open, and they're like, oh, okay, I'll do it. Oh man, Eric, thank you so much for coming on, brother. It's truly an honor to have you. I sense my spidey senses say that you have more stories, so maybe down the road, if you have time, come back on and share some more.
Got strong spidey senses.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me on here. I appreciate it, and thank you for what you're doing. And the voice of all of us.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, and thank you for that. And everybody, the link to the book will be in the show notes, and I'll also link your Instagram in there. I know you say you're not on there much, but
it's Twitter I'm mostly on, but it's under my real name.
Okay.
I'm not. No, it's all new to me.
I understand. Well, we'll talk afterwards. You give me where you want people to contact you, and I'll put that in the show notes right at the top so they can get a hold of you.
Okay.
All right, brother. Hey, I got to do the outro. It's pretty quick. I just got to thank the Patreon sergeants. Can you hang up for a couple seconds, or do you need to fly?
No, got it.
Okay, I'll be right with you. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Eric Hofstein. Man, great stories. Like I said, I can tell he's got some more. This is the part of the show where we thank the Patreon sergeants. Who I'm talking about is... Wrong button. I've only done this like how many times? Who I'm talking about is Nancy Hammond, Zach Haney, the great Brad Thompson, Kyle Roberts, Jace Crow, Christian, the great Brittany Sims, Elliot Sykes, Dave Elman, Holly Vanover, Richard Tolles, keep trucking, brother, Joe DeFries, Doug and Kelly Newman, I'll see you at church, guys, Dan Carlson from Burley Boards, check him out, amazing woodwork, Scott Young, Wayne M. Miller, Nick Noose, the great Tom Connell. Hold on, let me get Eric back in here. All right. Hang on, Eric. I'll be right with you. The great Tom Connell, Dennis Caraschio, George Tessier, Motorcrop Chronicles, that's Iceman. Check out his podcast. Greg Gadboy, Ben Peters, Scott Minkler, Tammy Walsh, Sean Clifford, Braden Walker, Sasha McNabb, Eric Wynn. Sorry, Mike Wynn, the great Mike Wynn. I'm sorry, Mike. Jason Lau, Sarah Pomeroy, Lauren Stimson, Jake Pinedo, John Shoemaker, James Rose, the great Seth Wright, Tony Fahey, Deputy William James Long, Andy Biggs, my man, the great Chris June, Adam Mihal, everybody, the great Gary Steiner, and the handsome Lane Campbell. My goodness, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for the Patreon sergeants. The link is in the show notes. And I want to do something I don't usually do. I'm going to go back to the interview and see if our guest Eric has a little bit of time here because I did not answer the listener question. Eric.
Yes.
Hey, brother.
Hey.
I forgot something. I had a listener who's a Patreon member had a question for us. Can we answer it?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
I took a screen picture of it. So if you become a Patreon sergeant, you can ask questions on the show. This is from Greg Gabboy. I've been watching a lot of these First Amendment audit videos. Not sure if you've heard of them or not. I kind of get mixed emotions on them. Some auditors are good and some come off as rude and obnoxious. I feel some do it now to bait cops into arresting them and earn a few bucks for it. I was wondering what it's like from the view of an officer. Keep up the great work. Look forward to each episode. Thank you, Greg, my man. I'll let you go first, Eric. What do you think about these people that put the camera in your face and tell you about their First Amendment rights?
Yes, I am very familiar with them. We also get the sovereign citizens who do the same thing, and so it just kind
Terrible.
of depends. It's an overly broad uh, label if you try to come up with an answer to some of the questions regarding that, because you have to think about, are you dealing with a sovereign citizen? Are you dealing with just a cop hater? Are you dealing with an ACLU lawyer? Because they'll walk around, they were constantly checking us
Oh,
with
gosh.
the homeless. They would film us. They would pretend to be homeless
Yeah.
and have their buddy film us when we would enforce sitting on the sidewalk or blocking a hallway. So it just depends on the intent of the person, but we're always, as cops, very wary of our spidey senses telling us this dude's setting us up for something.
Right.
Something about this ain't right. One of these things is not like the other, as Sesame Street would say.
Yeah,
You get a feel for it.
absolutely. We just had them come through my county, so I've recent experience with it. We got to remember with these guys, this is like for a lot of them, the one that came through our county is a big channel. It's big money for them. YouTube pays a lot of money if you have a couple 100,000, 300,000 subscribers. It's a business model. So where they may have started being cop blockers and trying to keep cops honest, they are now in the area of making money. So these guys clearly need the shock and awe. They need that clip they can use to make you watch the video of a cop or somebody violating their constitutional rights, and they have to make it seem like it's just done by police. It's not even a question. They just do it all the time. That's how the group that came through our area came off to me. So the thing is, police have gotten pretty good at it. You know, Eric, they've been around a while. So we know what we can do, what we can't do, when to ignore them, when to walk away. So these guys that came through started going after not cops, but any city or town worker, which is, like he was saying in the message, extra obnoxious. So they'll walk into a town hall in a town of 1,200 people with a camera and start filming the town clerk, who's a woman. It's rude. Do you have the right? Yeah. Is it rude? Yeah. You're dealing probably with a part-time clerk, and you got a camera in her face, and she's a woman. It's not polite. She doesn't want to be on camera. So she'll ask them, shut the camera off. And that's the clip they use. Shut the camera off. Violating our rights. We're in a public space. Well, she just doesn't want to be like on YouTube. She doesn't want you in her face. She's not trying to violate your right to free speech. She just doesn't. It's just rude. You're in a very small private setting in a little town hall where everybody's part-time. And this is what they were doing, Eric. They were going into these part-time town halls and getting right up in their faces. And these people work quietly and deal with a handful of citizens a day. So to them, they're ill-prepared. They have no idea. They don't even know if they're allowed to film in there because they're just like, they drive the school bus in the morning and then they come in and do their clerk work in the afternoon. And it's just very predatory and gross. And that's
Creepy.
it's creepy. And then they went up into New Hampshire, just north of us, and they'll do stuff like they'll go to the parking lot of the police department. They film all the cars. Expired inspection sticker. In Massachusetts, like California has smog. Massachusetts has vehicle inspection every year. You have to get inspected. They find somebody who works at the police department because they're parked there with an expired, it's like 30 days out. They need an inspection. So they go in and they get the front desk cop and they go, there's a car out here, red Honda Civic. It is expired, and I think it's pretty horrible how you let them pull their car right in here and work. And have you cited them? Have you written them a ticket? Have they been cited? I want an answer. I want the supervisor. This car belongs to like a secretary, right? Yeah, her inspection sticker's expired. Let me ask you this. I think it's along the same vein. I'll use like a cobbler. Do you think the people who work for the cobbler at a shop pay to have their shoes resoled? No, the cobbler does it. He helps them out, right? You work there, he's going to help you out. If you're a cop, are you going to write the chief secretary a money ticket because her inspection is out? No. Are you going to write your mom? No. Or your uncle? No. You might tell them, hey, I noticed your inspection sticker. Heads up, You're not, that's just reality. You're not going to be writing employees for like a ridiculous small thing like that. It's just reality. You're not going to do it. But these guys turn it into this monumental, you're a hypocrite. You're allowing her to park the car in the lot, and she has this this infraction with her vehicle, and they don't stop. They just hammer and hammer and hammer until they get somebody a little pissed off that goes, just get out of here. just leave. We're not doing that. And then they put it on the internet. So that's my experience with it. Like most of them, I've seen cop blockers that do it, and then the officers are cool, and they're like, they tell them they know the law. They tell them the law, and the cop blocker goes, okay, thank you, officer. And they're very polite, and they leave. Truly feels like a real audit of like, is this cop, does he know his stuff, and is he respecting our rights? He is going to be respectful, call him sir, and I'll leave. But there's these other groups with the big YouTube channels that like they just need the reaction for their channel, so they're gonna hammer down until they really piss somebody off, and that's why I hate it. Like it is obnoxious to me. That's where I stand on it.
Absolutely agree.
So I don't like one of them. They went into like a part-time fire department, and they're like putting the camera in the bays and filming the firefighters, and these guys are like, out of the goodness of their heart, they make like $18 an hour to go put the fire out at your house. And they keep up with all their training. It's a call fire department. And you're up in their space filming them. And the fact that they're upset about that is a violation of your constitutional rights. It's like,
well, you get internet stalkers. You get weirdos who just think it's fun to track down the person and harass them and get their personal info.
That's the other thing. That now you've like doxed them. It's like, oh, here's the guy. He works for such and such fire department in this place, and he's an authoritarian monster. And you get these psychos who watch this, and they think, well, now it's my job to take them down.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes a safety issue, but there's no law regulating that.
Right. Yeah. So, Greg, that's our answer. I do think it's highly annoying. I don't have a problem. I've been filmed on traffic stops a bunch of times, and I just do what I do. I do my normal stuff. I'm like, do you want me to say your YouTube channel? I'll make a joke out of it if they're, whatever. And I just do my thing. I either cut them a V or I don't, and then I leave. That's it. That's all I do. I don't listen to their coaxing or try to, when you're talking like you said, Eric, with the sovereign citizens is a different story because they can go the whole, well, I'm a free man traveling. I don't need a license. They get into these. They have deep knowledge of these obscure Supreme Court cases where they think they've proven that they don't have to pay taxes and they don't have to have a license to drive a car and they don't have to have all these things.
The courts are not legitimate because the flag has a gold fringe. That's a naval flag. So the naval authority has no jurisdiction over land-based crimes.
Right. They go
stuff they tell you.
It's like, okay, thank you. And, it's the bottom line with us is give us the license and registration or we're going to jail. You can get your attorney. You can sue the department. You can sue me. But in Massachusetts, if I demand your license and you don't give it, you're going to prison. And then we can have a longer conversation while I'm booking you about all your rights. And it usually works. Usually they just succumb to whatever. And, the hardcore ones don't. They get dragged to jail, and then nothing ever comes of it because they don't have any legal standing. They have these conspiracy theories that they've drummed up and they believe. So I don't know. It annoys the hell out of me, but hey, it's America. People have a lot of rights, and I love that about it. So I put up with it. But Eric, not a problem you have, my man, because you've done your time.
Not anymore. Thank God.
You're good to go. Yeah, I'm sure you got more than your fair share where you were working. So, Eric, thank you for coming back on. I've never done this, but I had in my head, I forgot this kid's question, and I really wanted you to chime in, so I appreciate you spending a little bit more time.
No problem. No problem.
All right, brother. I'm going to close the show out. Guys, thank you so much for joining us, and I will see you guys next week.